right. Hi, everybody. We have a few people joining us from the waiting room. Thanks so much for being here on this Sunday evening with us. That was such a wonderful performance. Sam, what do you think?
Well, the performance was really remarkable. Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center really has a way of delivering strong performances. It's what they're known for. And the Q&A is still going on.
Yeah, the Q&A is still going on.
Yeah, and they're having a good time talking about string playing. And there's a lot of intricate questions and long answers. But chamber music is about details. It really is. The details matter deeply in good chamber music. So
that's very true. I'm excited that we already have a few people joining us, but I'll let everyone continue to finish watching the Q&A so they don't miss anything. But welcome as everyone jumps on the call.
now Kristen Lee, who just led the performance of Appalachian Spring, she's getting a chance to answer what it feels like to lead. And there's quite a range of ages in the musicians on stage for that piece. Some very knowledgeable players and some really important wind players, but also some extremely talented young people. And it's intergenerational.
Were they just saying that one of the gentlemen that played today is part of the Orion String Quartet?
All of the Orion String Quartet played the
okay.
Haydn, and the cellist was actually the soloist in the Geminiani Sonata that began, and he played beautifully.
Okay.
Very, very nice. Although that piece was never designed to be played in a hall of 1,000 seats, ever. Geminiani would have fainted. He would have fainted. But, in good acoustics and good instruments and good audiences make that possible. Yeah, Kristen's talking about visual cues when playing with musicians, and David Finkel watched her like a hawk. He was enjoying, you could see all the motions change on his face in response to what she was putting out. And Nick Konlakis, the cellist next to him, had his face squarely into the score and was not going to look at David, who was, obviously the boss, was not going to look at Kristen too much, but he looked enough,
I think they're wrapping up.
Wolf. Well, now they're getting off on topics of where they're all playing or not playing this summer and what they're doing in the fall. It's sort of veering off the topics of the performance itself. So we might let them do that. It's, you know, it's an interesting thing. Chamber music is very democratic. And when you put chamber music players into a room and you start talking, they're very respectful. They listen. They tend not to interrupt. And therefore, if there's something that they want to talk about and it's going to go on for a while, it tends to go on for a while. So that's the nature of rehearsals. And we're going to talk about what it means to rehearse and you know, so what it's like to rehearse with the composer around. That's one of my topics for this chat. But first I just want to, I see others coming in, which is nice. And I see William Land, I see Bill Land's name up, so I hope that Bill and Mary are both there. And see Elise Kirk, I might know who that is. And just want to say thank you to Elise and thank you to Tammy for making this possible today, and to welcome everybody to a little post-concert talk of our own, and the opportunity to see some friends and hear what you felt about the performance as well. See if you have any questions for me that I can answer. I was really drawn to this program chiefly because of the Copland. And I'm gonna, I'm gonna sort of launch into that because I think there's a lot to say about it. And some of it's, to me, very interesting. This was a wonderful performance. It was clean, it was strong, it was accurate, it was good ensemble, there's plenty of character. I've been spending a lot of time listening to a cassette tape that I got more than 30 years ago when I was in school, and it was Aaron Copland rehearsing Appalachian Spring in the original version of the score that he wrote for the ballet, and it was on a cassette tape. Here it is. Remember cassette tapes? I got out my Walkman, blast from the past, to play this cassette tape. And I had to use it to transcribe some of the comments that Copland was making to the musicians. One of the musicians in this recording was a very young violinist by the name of Ani Kavafian, who we heard last week. She's a member of Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, and she played the first piece last time we got together for this. So she was younger then. We were all younger then, I suppose. But what's fascinating about this piece is that it is one of the most representative, 20th century pieces of American music. It really did a lot to establish Copland. He won the Pulitzer Prize for it. And it also was a means for people like Leonard Bernstein, who was a younger friend of Copland's, to go to London and perform and to make his debut with an Italian orchestra in Milan with this piece. And people responded to it universally as being American. Not just the title. I'll tell you some interesting story about the title too in just a sec. But it's one of those pieces that seems to have come about that captured the public imagination, and it always has. And that's why Copland, I think, was so interested not just in writing the ballet score, which was commissioned by Martha Graham. And if you go on YouTube, you can see Martha Graham dancing this ballet. She was the lead dancer in this piece. And there's a sort of a funny story about it. The recording I was listening to got released as a CD without Copland talking about it. And there's some liner notes by a fellow named Philip Rania. I'm gonna read them. Appalachian Spring concerns a pioneer celebration which takes place around a newly built Pennsylvania farmhouse in the early part of the last, namely the 19th century. Copland remembers that when he arrived in Washington, D.C. for the final rehearsal on the day before the premiere, the first thing I said to Martha Graham was, "What have you called it?" "Appalachian Spring." "Oh," I responded, "what a nice name. Where did you get it?" She told me that the title was after a line in Hart Crane's poem, The Bridge. "It really has nothing to do with the ballet," she added. "I just liked it." Since that time, says Copland, I can't begin to tell you how often people have come up to me and said, "Mr. Copland, when I hear your score, I can just see the Appalachians and I feel spring." And of course, that's not really how the piece came about at all. but there is a logic to the piece that's not so dissimilar from it. And I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about that, because Copland describes the piece. And since we didn't get that, maybe you'll understand the piece differently this way. It's actually in 8 different, it's a suite in 8 sections. The first one is marked very slowly, introduction of the characters one by one in a suffused light. Number 2, fast allegro. Sudden burst of unison strings in A major arpeggios starts the action. A sentiment both elated and religious gives the keynote to this theme. 3, moderate, duo for the bride and her intended. Scene of tenderness and passion. Then 4, quite fast, the revivalist and his flock. Folksy feelings, suggestions of square dances and country fillers. 5, still faster, subito allegro, solo dance of the bride, presentiment of motherhood, extremes of joy and fear and wonder. 6, very slowly, as at first, transition scene to music reminiscent of the introduction. 7, calm and flowing, scenes of daily activity for the bride and her farmer husband. There are 5 variations on a shaker theme. The theme, sung by a solo clarinet, was taken from a collection of shaker melodies, and the tune is called Simple Gifts. The final 8th section is moderate. It's a coda. The bride takes her place among her neighbors. At the end, the couple are left quiet and strong in their new house. Muted strings intone a hushed prayer-like chorale passage. The close is reminiscent of the opening music. So that's the piece. Copland loved this piece, and he knew that it had traction, and he decided he would make it into an abbreviated suite, which he did the year it was premiered, which was 1944. And then the next year he created the orchestral suite that instantly lifted the reputation of this piece. And it wasn't until much later in his life that he actually published the original suite, which he recorded. And in that recording, we hear a lot of things that he feels about the piece. And I'd like to read you some of those, because I don't know how many of you have ever attended an orchestra open rehearsal or gone to a chamber music festival like the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival. If you go to chamber music, Santa Fe Chamber Music, for instance, and you're a donor at a certain level, you can attend the rehearsals. And we have one Spivey friend who does this every year, and I think she likes the rehearsals even more than she likes the concerts, because she likes the dialogue that the musicians have. So on this recording that Copland made in New York in 1973, I think it was, there are, on this cassette tape are his comments, and it's, you know, he's taking them through this quick rehearsal before they actually put on the red light and record. And Copland comes out and he says, "Good afternoon." And he has sort of a high nasal voice. He was born in Brooklyn. You can hear a little bit of the Brooklyn accent. It's clear, and it's sort of plain, and you can hear it very easily. "Good afternoon. I assume everyone knows this piece." And then one musician who seems to be from the front answers, "Only by reputation," which Copland repeats with a gentle laugh. So they're going to start the opening, and he says, "All right," lifts his baton, and he says, "A warm, soft, warm sound without any sense of effort, and a sort of non-committal clarinet sound." And they begin. And then he stops. He says, "Could you do it without any sense of diminuendo on each note," which means getting softer. "A little bit too much attack on each note as well." And they try again, and he says, "Better." And then it gets going. When it gets lively, things start to get a little out of balance, and he stops them. He says, "The tune is in the top violin. Therefore, don't hold too powerfully to those accompanying chords. When you hold the long note, soften it a bit, please." And then we reach this point, a very lively allegro, when it really kicks into action, which is, you know, the piece really takes off. And he stops them there, and he says, "Would you mark a crescendo on the A with the fermata," which is that that note, "more crescendo on the ya-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta." And that was something he never wrote, but that was the tradition that evolved out of performances of the piece, probably with orchestra. And he commented, "I'm used to that. I don't know where that came from." So the composer is commenting on how this piece that he has written has taken on a life of its own. And art does that. You hear music, you hear performances, and traditions emerge out of performances just because musicians have different responses to what's on the page. And the composer can say, all right, yeah, I like that. Let's do that from now on. That's one of the benefits of standing in front of the composer when you're, if the composer is standing in front of you. And later on in that section, he says, not so much loudness, bounciness is what I'm looking for. And then he comments again, the idea of marcato is sort of a playful manner. It shouldn't sound over-energized, but bouncy, light, happy. And then he starts and he says, good, lightly, a little more pizz, which means pizzicato, just plucking the string. Don't hurry. And then there's the scurrying line, where the lines go up and down and up and down and up and down, and then it calms down. And then they start playing more slowly, and there's more emotion in the music, and he says, stops them. And he says, at 2, gentlemen, everybody, ladies, watch out about it getting too sweetly sentimental. It's a little on the Massenet side there. Massenet was a French romantic operatic composer who loved lush harmonies, and it had tinges of sentimentality. Copland said, play it sort of more cleanly. And 14, well, nobody else would be disturbed by it, but I get a little disturbed by it. 14, it's too sentimental, too much sentiment. It's the wrong sound. It sounds on the Tchaikovsky side. Don't play so, make it more American in spirit. And the sentiment isn't all shown right on the face, It's more cool. The music by itself is warm. You don't have to help it by, and he just sort of trails off and he starts again. And then he's happy. 16, everybody, please. Not so sentimental, please, and more non-committal. This is a little passage work here. Miss Graham is dancing. So he's talking about the complete original ballet suite. And obviously he had to write a few measures for Martha Graham to get to some other side of the stage to begin doing whatever she wanted to do. And he felt that the musicians were giving that little stretch there too much importance. Like, don't over-emote on this. She's just repositioning herself is basically what he's telling them. And then a little bit later, we're getting into the, the sort of the revivalist mode and, all the things that are happening in the community. And he says, take it from 31. This is a barn dance. Get in the mood. And then he stops them and he says, that's better. And he goes on. There's moments where in this performance where I heard a moment that Copland probably would not have, he would have stopped them. He would have stopped. There was a place in the variation. It was the real fast, after the fast variation, which was really quite fast. This is the simple gifts, when they do the variations on that. That fast variation was the fastest I've ever heard it played, but the musicians can do it. The technique they have is just phenomenal. So Gloria Chin is just like, nuclear powered pianist does it flawlessly. And then afterwards, there's a slower, and Copland wanted it more rounder. They were making it sound somewhat stentorian and a little bit sort of edgy. And what he told his musicians was, it should be round and noble sounding rather than violent. I put eloquent. He wanted eloquence out of that moment. So he's keeping the musicians' feet to the fire. Look at what's in the score. Listen to what I'm telling you, but also see how I've marked it. There's character already in the score for you. And then here comes, I think, one of the most important moments of the entire tape, and I should probably stop with this one. I could go on. But it's where this very syncopated thing is going on. It's just shorter, drier, more sforzato, which is like a boom that gets right off it. A sudden abrupt to nothing. Don't forget, we're not playing the Sac du Printemps, which is the Rite of Spring. This is meant to be light, bouncy, and happy, and he says Amerikanisch, which is either German and or Yiddish, and the musicians all laugh. Bounce it more, that's what I mean, bounce it, that's it. And then he goes bouncing on and he's happier with it. But then with the syncopation, the musicians in this little rehearsal they're having is not going very well. And he stops them and he's saying, why is that so hard, gentlemen? 1, 2, 1, 2, ta 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 ta. Count, please, don't guess. And that's the testiest he got in this entire rehearsal. But they responded because when they started recording it later in that piece, it's perfect. It's totally perfect. And this will be the last one. At the very end of the piece, as it's winding down in the chorale-like session, the rehearsal number is 67. So he calls 67. Now, softer, very sul tasto, which means in violin playing very much, your finger's on the string, but it's closer, it's right over the fingerboard itself, which creates a softer, rounder, somewhat more distant sound. Misterioso, there's a great mood here. And he says, can we do all that again, please? All right, everybody, please watch 67. That's my favorite place in the whole piece, and I'd love to have it come out nicely, organ-like. It should have a very special quality, as if you weren't moving your bows. And they start, and then he says, no, that sounds too timid. It should sound rounder and more satisfying, not distant, quietly present. He starts again. He says, that's better. Yes, no diminuendos, like an organ sound. What struck me in listening to all these comments he gave to the musicians is how often he uses the word sound, 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 and how he's trying to characterize it, because he has a very vivid image of what he wants. And he loves the piece, and he's by that time, he spent many, many years with the piece, almost two decades with the piece. And he never changed it when he had it re-recorded with all 13 original instruments in the full score. And yet he wanted them to find the right character, and that's always what chamber music is about. It's finding the right character and how to express it in ways that sometimes benefit from some visual imagery. Because if you can think it, you can probably hear it. And that's what I think Copland was trying to do, knowing quite well that this recording will go down for all time as his recording of his own piece, and it meant a lot to him. And being in New York, they probably did it in a grand total of 4 hours, with a little rehearsal and a break, and they went right into the first take, and they probably did at least one more, and then they were done. So we have that record, which is great. Copland himself was a wunderkind. He was one of the brightest figures of American music. He was born in 1900, and he was very talented. He was born in Brooklyn. His family wasn't particularly musical, although his mother liked the arts. And it was decided that after he went to high school and did great work, he should go to Europe to study. And he went to study with someone who didn't much like it in Paris, this one place, and was told that he should study with Nadia Boulanger, which was the leading teacher of the world. She was known as Mademoiselle. Richard Morris, our late departed wonderful organist and reasonist, he studied with Nadia Boulanger sometime later. And Nadia Boulanger trained generations of composers. This was very unusual. Generally, one did not study with a woman, but she was an extraordinarily accomplished teacher. And Copland said that she could figure out where the weaknesses were in anybody's score, and moreover, she could tell you why it was weak and what to do about it. And he felt that was extremely valuable. So she was an organist, and Nadia Boulanger came to make a tour in the United States with a symphony that Copland wrote for organ and orchestra, written in 1924. They went on a tour, and in this other program note that comes out of a recording of Appalachian Spring, and this is with Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, which is on Deutsche Grammophon. It's a really wonderful recording. And guess who the pianist is in this one? It's Wu Han. Wu Han is with Orpheus making this performance. We just had David in this performance, and Wu Han is in the recorded performance. And in this note it says, it was after the premiere in New York that the conductor Walter Damrosch turned to the audience and made his famous remark, if a young man at the age of 23 can write a symphony like that, in 5 years he'll be ready to commit murder. And Damrosch was much more of a conservative conductor. He also had an important role in starting the Chicago Symphony. Whereas on the other hand, Copland and Bernstein, we're getting to Bernstein now a little bit, they were strongly influenced by Serge Koussevitzky, who was the music director of the Boston Symphony, who also created Tanglewood. And Koussevitzky has a foundation that to this day commissions new works for orchestra. And Koussevitzky wanted everyone to write things for him. And so much new music came out of that, generations of that. The Bartók Concerto for Orchestra came out of that. That's one of my all-time all-time great pieces, any period, any decade, any century. So Copland and Bernstein actually met in 1938, and at a party. It was November of 38. Copland was born in 1900, so it was his 38th birthday. And then Bernstein started studying at the Berkshire Music Center that Koussevitzky established 2 years later, and its chairman was, guess who, Aaron Copland. So that's how the relationship started going. And when Copland wrote his piano concerto and premiered it with the New York Philharmonic, guess who was on the podium? The then music director, Leonard Bernstein. So they went on for a long, long, long time. Bernstein said that Copland really was the only composition teacher he ever had. And in Bernstein's letters, there's just, and they've been published, there's this gigantic thick book of it. They wrote letters constantly to each other. They were very close. They had crazy names for each other. Every letter starts with a new salutation, some of which are very funny, some of which are politically incorrect these days. And some of them are just mysterious. You'd never figure them out. But they could bare their souls to each other about what they were trying to write, what they were trying to do. And it's like having that sympathetic soul to whom you can confess what's going on in your creative life. I'm sure that Copland helped Bernstein's career. And I'm sure that even though despite the disparity of ages, I'm sure that Copland's energy and his ability to bring Copland's music to life helped Copland stay active for years and years to come. So we've just had our moment of Copland, and again, I thought they gave us a wonderful reading of the piece. Oof, sorry to go on for so long, but I fell in love with this piece too. When I was at Dartmouth, and suddenly I had music appreciation, and I had to listen to the following 50 pieces in the next 10 weeks, I freaked out because I didn't have many of those recordings. I lived right across the street from the library, but the library wasn't open very late, and I was a night owl. I needed to listen. So I signed up to my Columbia Records, sort of big deal. You get to pick like 25 or 30 different, recordings, and then you get the recording of the week or the month automatically by mail. That's where this comes from. And I have toted this thing around the world for more than 50 years. And it was in my garage and I was going to give it away, but then this opportunity came, no, I have to go find this. So hoarding and holding on to stuff sometimes makes a difference, because when there's people like Copland talking, it's worth listening. So there must be questions. So 12 for a penny, I hear. Yeah, it's like 1 cent. It was like such a deal. How could you not start that subscription? But then you got all these things that, sort of re-released, or that you already had, or if you didn't act quick enough and you could choose to refuse them, but if you didn't send back the card, then it would come automatically anyhow. Such is life. Anyway, life is different now. Are there questions? Are there people? Can we talk about other things?
I'm sure we have a lot of fun friends on the call. So if you guys want to, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and just ask a question if you'd like to ask Sam a question. If not, you can always put it in the chat box as well, right at the bottom of your screen. So what did you guys think about today's performance?
Oh, the Durdens used the orchestral version as their wedding music. How wonderful.
Yes, we did. And it was interesting because, this is 1973, right? And so other than Debbie and I and Debbie's sister and a few of our musician friends, nobody else in the building had ever heard it before. And
wow.
And everybody, the mothers and the bridesmaids, all had to come in at a particular point in the music. Yes. And Debbie's sister was the only one she was the maid of honor. She was the master of ceremonies. So she knew, and no one else knew where they were supposed to walk in the door. They were all afraid of walking in at the wrong time. I was back there, and she was telling, now it's your turn, now it's your turn, now it's your turn.
Well, and then my dad wanted to go too soon.
Yeah.
And I was holding his arm back, said, no, Daddy, it's not time.
And I find this choice remarkable because there's a bassoonist and a flutist here talking to us about this. And Greg, did you hear in this performance, the bassoon at times almost sounded like a trumpet?
Yeah, we were talking about that. I mean, I talking about that the place where in the orchestral version you expect trumpets, the
Yeah.
bassoon and the clarinet together, and mostly the bassoon. I closed my eyes and I could hear the trumpets, right?
Wasn't that marvelous? That
Yeah.
caught my attention. I thought that was really fine. That's imagination. Again, that's imagination at work.
Yeah.
Well, but you got married and you paid Copland a royalty, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. It's weird though, because we used the orchestra. I didn't even know that the string ensemble version existed back in 1973, right? We'd never heard it. And we wanted the orchestral version because the real big bum bum, that's when the bride had to come in, right? So that part was easy to figure out. But all the other places, people were like, when do I start? When do I walk? And fortunately Debbie's sister was back there and she could tell them when to go. So
that's so great. When Copland recorded it in the 70s, he actually added some strings to it. And that's because those of you who have ever played a string instrument or played it in ensembles, one string instrument on a voice is good. 3 string instruments on the same voice, that's also good. 2 is really wonky because the 2 can be off just a little bit, and it's just there's not enough sort of margin to blend. And I felt Copland was very astute in going from 4 violins to 6 violins when we recorded it, not just because he had the orchestral sound in his ear. He liked all of his versions of it. But had you had the smaller version, I don't think it would have had the same imprimatur, and it might not have been in tune either. You never.
That's right. Yeah. We probably would have used the big version even if we had known about the
well, that's marvelous. Now I have a new association with this piece.
It's just, I think, just the finest music written in the 20th century by an American, at least. It's just had a top 25 American pieces, and Appalachian Spring was number 3. Bernstein, West Side Story was 2, and Adagio for Strings was number 1.
Barber, another Curtis person. Yes. Wow. I see, Janet, you've got your mic off. Do you have a question?
No, well, I was wondering, was the piece critical and popular from the beginning, or did it have to grow?
It was a ballet as part of a festival that was presented by a foundation at the Library of Congress. It was a very small space, and I'm not sure how many performances the ballet were given. You can see Martha Graham dancing it. There's video of her doing it, and I think it was sort of done for television, so it probably reached some people. But it really didn't take off until it hit the orchestral version, because chamber music doesn't reach thousands of people like it would in the internet age. It would reach small groups. But when it came to the symphony orchestra in the 40s and the 50s, the symphony orchestra was still the voice of classical music. Opera was its own world. But if the symphony was doing it, then it must have been important, right? It just reached so many more people, and then it got recorded, and it became instantly popular. And it was one of those pieces too that again, it traveled well, and Toscanini did a great favor to Samuel Barber by taking his first symphony to Europe. Bernstein did that with Copland in this piece, and it was win-win. So it's never gone out of popularity in chamber music circles, but I think it's so interesting to know that Copland did not want it to be sentimental. He didn't want it to be too nostalgic and too backwards. He just wanted it to be plain and simple and clear and whole and good. And that to me right now is an aspect of America that I wish I had greater depth of belief in. But the piece still has it. It speaks so openly of the values behind it, and that I think makes it sort of perennially beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And one of the things I loved was when Kristen Lee was talking about what she thought the theme of the piece was, or the humanity of the piece, and what makes it human was the imperfections of the piece and the beauty and the imperfections. And I just, I found a lot of hope in that. Like that's a message for now.
Yeah, for a young person to find that is, I think, very encouraging. And if any of you have the Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians, I have the 5th edition, in which one of the volumes is labeled "Back to Bolivia." That lets you know what year that's from. And in it, I lost my train of thought. Well, in it, and it's a description of his style, and it's written by Virgil Thompson. And Thompson describes his style in very few words. It says, you know, his orchestration. It says, Copland's orchestration is well described by Thompson. Plain, clean colored, deeply imaginative, theatrically functional, it has style. And the reason Appalachian Spring is so interesting for people who study, you know, composers, is that he did both versions. He did the big version and the small version, and that there's a really good, intricate musicological explanation of why Copland sounds American. And it has to do with the layerings of intervals that you wouldn't think fit together, but they actually do. And that opening, that beautiful, quiet opening, and Tammy, that beautiful, quiet, soft ending, with the open 7th, which is an unresolved, you know, interval that's lurking back there, but it sounds right because of how Copland stacks them and voices them. And that's the beauty of orchestration. Yeah. Anyone else have, and we're talking all about the Copland, there was Haydn as well. Oh my gosh, we got a really nice, you know, Prussian quartet from Haydn. And that, did you have the dream? Did the dream carry you away, anybody? I felt that the, who was it? It was the violinist who characterized it saying, well, this could be late Beethoven or this could be Mahler. I think that was a bit of a stretch. I feel that slow movement is so beautiful and it works so well is because the voice leading of the 4 music, you know, the 2 violins, the viola, and the cello, it's Haydn at his best. It sounds so natural, yet it is so entirely sophisticated, yet it sounds simple. And the players just play the way they should, and the voices are going where they want to, but suddenly you're hearing harmonies that you are not expecting. And they keep shifting. It's sort of like, oh, my mood ring is changing again. You know, it's like, how did this happen? And Haydn did that effortlessly. That was very new at the time. So was it Mahler? No, Mahler is about everything subjective to me, and Beethoven is everything eternal to me. I don't think that music is that, but I thought it was very, very beautifully rendered, just the same. Haydn's good. Haydn's like fresh air and, you know, fresh air and clean cold water. I think I've used that before. I think Jack and Susan have heard me say that in Austria, but Haydn is like that. So, how are we on time? We're probably chattering on here. It's wonderful to see all these faces and have people come back and to see some new people here as well. We're not doing chamber music next weekend, but we are on the 16th. And Elise, do you have any more comments from the chat room that we should be paying attention to?
I think that's everything from everybody. So if you have any more questions, real quick before we go, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'm just so happy to see you guys all again and more people on the call than we had last week. So I look forward to seeing you all again next time. Check your email and keep an eye out on the Thursday before the weekend for the link to the call. Okay.
And on the 16th, when we start this program, when they start the musical program, don't miss the beginning. The beginning is I think it could be absolutely splendid. It's this Handel aria from Samson, Let the Bright Seraphim. And it ends, it's actually an oratorio rather. It ends the oratorio and it's brilliant and it's sort of short and it sort of does its thing and then it's over and they're not going to repeat it. So don't miss the beginning because it's going to be really good. And then we get some Mendelssohn by Orion Weiss and Hugh Watkins. Hugh is a composer. Orion is also a composer. Orion's been to Spivey Hall. Hugh hasn't. He's British, but maybe someday he'll come. So Mendelssohn Andante in Allegro Brilliant for piano 4 hands. That will be lots of notes, and I'm sure it'll just be gossamer gorgeous. And then we get the Franck F minor quintet for piano and violins, viola, and cello, which is very red meat. That's the day you need beef on your menu if you're eating beef. You know, it's a beef sort of way to end that program. But it comes from a deep vein of Romanticism, which is at the same time sort of imbued with, I would say, Gallic elegance. And it's a very, very great piece. And I'm looking forward to hearing these musicians play it. The lead violinist is a violinist who's known, his name is Choling Lin, but we call him Jimmy Lin. Jimmy is a great player, and he ran La Jolla Summerfest in San Diego for more than a decade. He's now stepped down, but he's a marvelous player. So that offers musical wonders to behold. So thank you all. Thanks for coming. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll be in touch. If for those of you who like a cappella vocal music, we have some extraordinary things in store for you. We'll be emailing you soon about them. They started in London yesterday, and I tuned in to listen to the first one. I wanted to sort of dip my toe in the water before telling you whether it was going to be good or not. It's going to be amazing. It's really, really fine music making. There was a technical glitch because it was a live stream and they lost their power in the middle of it. The church they were in had a power outage. So guess what? The live stream did not stream, but they were recording it. So they caught up to it. And then they came back to where we left off at 1 hour and 14 minutes. And I forget how it was at the exact spot. And then there was a really nice afterwards sort of chat with the artists in civilian clothes, sitting on the floor of the church on pillows, just talking with each other and responding to questions that the audience gave. These are real and in real time. And again, you'll be hearing more about them quite soon.
Sounds
so thanks
great.
again.
Thank you, Sam.
My pleasure. Thank you, Janet. Thank you all. And be well. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Sam.